Want to drive faster? Listen in as Kinch Rendell, an SCCA National Trophy winner and multi-time Pro Solo champion himself, interviews the best autocrossers in the land. He talks fast and drives even faster. And now here's your host, Kinch Rendell.
I get shaky hand every once in a while, yeah. If I get shaky hand, it's a good one.
Hello, this is Kinch, and this episode features Jason Frank. Let's call him Mr. ST. He has been in ST class pretty much his whole time in solo. National championships are 2007, 2013, 2015. The classes, STS, STC, and STS. For Pro Solo, 2011, 2012, and 2014. That's STC, STC, and STS. He also won the Triad Award back in 2013. I've had fun competing against him. He's in the same platform as me quite often. Hope you enjoy it. Jason, welcome to the show. When did you get into autocrossing?
Oh man, 2002 was my first year of autocross. I had wanted to come out a couple of times, but I didn't feel like I had a car that I could race with. But I didn't know any better. I had plenty of cars I could race with previously, but I felt like I need some sporty car to start, but that wasn't the case.
Now you have a sporty car. So what was that first car that brought you out there?
First car that brought me out was a 1997 Honda Prelude.
Did it have the special handling package on
it? No, it did not. It was not a Type SH. It was just a base model with a spoiler. It was cool.
Was it a big spoiler?
No, just an OEM spoiler.
Ah, I had the 97 EX, first car I ever autocrossed, with the big spoiler that my brother put on. And the shocks, and the suspension, and the 80,000 mile, basically run flats.
But the most important thing was the big spoiler, though.
Yeah, they probably weighed 15 pounds. Every time I see a green Civic go by, I'm like, is that it? Oh, it has a bigger spoiler. Maybe it's the car I used to have. So what brought you, how did you even know about autocross? Did you race? Did you bicycle race? Did you do anything before this?
I'm fairly competitive. I've been competing in other things. I did do some mountain bike racing for a little while, and then I tried my hand at a motorcycle, and I really liked that, but I saw a couple people go off, and I went, I don't think I want to do that, so maybe I should get a car on me. So once that happened, I decided I was going to try and find some type of car racing. And I was already part of an online Prelude forum for several years, and I met James Yammer on the forum. So James Yammer is the one that actually got me into autocross. It's all his fault.
So he goes back that far also?
Yep.
Ah, I did not know. Things we learn. Yeah. So do you have a story you have to drop about James? You don't have to, but. Was any good back then? Like, how long had he been autocrossing?
He'd only been autocrossing for a couple of years at that point, and he also had a Prelude, so he had an SH that gave him all sorts of those nice electrical problems that Honda had. It kept kind of like going into ice mode on him all the time. But we kind of traveled around the Midwest and did track days and some autocross events in the area. So James Yam's story, the best James Yam story I have is Guam. So if you ask him about Guam, that's a good one.
All right. So did you co-drive right away?
I did not co-drive right away. I drove my own car. I actually wasn't aware that I could co-drive.
Okay. So this leads me into wondering, what did you learn? Were you kind of quick at first? Were you slow? If you didn't co-drive, did you ride with people? What kind of got you into this where you started learning and picking up tips?
I started off the season with the local Milwaukee region driver's school that gets hosted at the beginning of the year. And I don't know if I was fast at first, probably not. It was actually STS class. I've been in this STS, ST, STC, or some form of that class pretty much from the beginning, except for one outlier year. But my Honda Prelude was out there against some Sentras and Neons and stuff like that at first. And I continued to take that driver's school every year until they kicked me out and told me that I couldn't take it anymore because we have a lot of fast drivers in Milwaukee.
They told you had to probably instruct at that point?
That is exactly what happened. They said no longer can you be a student. You have to be a teacher. I think when I won my first index in the Prelude, they told me that I couldn't be a student anymore. I think I got lucky on my first index because I think it rained half the day, and all the good guys were in the other heat or something. But I don't think I had any business winning at that point. I mean, I was decent, but I shouldn't have been winning index, I don't think.
You called foul. Like, no, really, it rained. So seat time, going back to then and maybe now, it sounds like you took a class. How often, how many events were you making it to?
I was making it to a lot of events at that time. Once I was in. We have 4 local clubs here in the area that are pretty close. Milwaukee region, Chicago region, Wisconsin Autocrossers, Inc., and Tri-State Sports Car Council are the 4 clubs that run by us, all run on SCCA rules. I was basically attending every event that I could for those. So I was probably averaging 20 events a year for the first 3 years or so, just because I was trying to get as much seat time as possible.
Nice. And you mentioned being competitive. I'm pretty sure you still bowl quite a bit. Is that what probably drove you, or what hooked you in right away?
I think the adrenaline, driving on the edge is the big thing that hooked me in. And the people. If it wasn't for the people, I wouldn't be driving around the country to race for a couple of minutes at a time. But, the competitiveness has always been there for me. That's easy for me. If I'm not competitive at something, I kind of lose interest pretty quick. So, obviously, type A personality. So the fact that I was doing decent and I was seeing some improvements, that was a big thing. But the people, if everybody sucks, I wouldn't be hanging around.
That makes me wonder. So I know you've had co-drivers off and on throughout the years. How has that worked for you? Would suggest people do the same? Should they copy you? Should they have co-drivers?
When I first started, I think my first co-drive was with Colin Fiedler, actually, in a Civic. When I was the co-driver, not the car owner. I worked out really well for me. I like the co-driver aspect of it. If you're having a bad day, you don't know if it's the car or if it's your class or what it is. But when you have somebody else in the car with you, it makes it a lot easier to tell what's going on. Maybe I'm just having an off day. Maybe they are. But it also gets you competitive with somebody in the car, especially if there's somebody that's close to your level. It just pushes both of you to be faster. My first co-drive with Colin, though, that was good for me. I learned some things because he was faster than me at that point. And as we progressed, we actually didn't co-drive. Craig Mankiewicz and I co-owned a car, which was the team undercoat, or the undercoat car, as everybody likes to call it. It was the first time I actually co-owned a car with someone. That was great because it was my first full, I'll call it a full class build. And it was good to have somebody to go out in the garage with and hang out with. And when Craig and I first bought the car, we were friends and we knew each other from autocross, but we didn't really know each other. And he's one of my best friends now. We've been, we still keep track of each other, and he'll be back one of these days. He's been on a little hiatus, but it's fun with somebody else in the garage and all that good times, sit around, drinking beer, working on a car, somebody to help you out there at 2:00 in the morning when you got to leave the next day. It always helps to have a little bit of motivation because sometimes I'm like, I don't want to go out to the garage, and then I'll forget about it. But when Craig was around, one of us kind of at least got somebody out in the garage, so that was helpful. And now we have the car, and we put co-drivers in the car every year, and I like it. Again, you have somebody to help you out to do things, but it's good to, now I like seeing people improve, now with data acquisition and all this stuff, now we can sit down after a run and look and see who was, 5 foot off a cone or why we weren't on the gas quicker and stuff like that. So now co-driving is cool because I like to see people get better, and I feel like I can provide them, a place where, if they come run with me, they can see what they need to do, and I can help people improve that way.
Yeah, those are great tips. I even like the first one I just started, took some notes here, that you don't know if it's you or the car or something else. But if you have a co-driver who's pretty consistent, you know that. And I can tell you from having co-drivers and then not having them sometimes at nationals, when I didn't have one a couple of years ago, it was so weird. It was like nothing for me to do, which I like to be doing anything but thinking. It was just odd. Something, and this year I may or may not have one. I'm like, oh my goodness, I might need to make sure I get somebody there for nationals at least, or at least the bigger events.
Yeah, and for me, I'll drive around a problem, and I'm so concentrated when I'm on course that I'm not thinking about, little things that might be wrong with the car. And typically it's my co-driver that notices it. They're like, hey, something's going on in the right front, or did you feel that? And when I'm on course, I'm full concentration on course and line and placement and stuff like that. And when I come back in, after I kind of decompress my line choice and everything like that, I might go, okay, what's the car doing? And I'll start making some setup changes. But I'm usually not the first one to notice when something's broken. Unless it's really bad. A little minor, this isn't going right. My wife, Hillary, she notices that way sooner than I did. Craig noticed it way sooner than I do too as well. So that's not my strong suit.
I like what you're saying. I'm not sure if you fall into this category. I consider I don't think I have much feel for what the car's doing, which is what I'm kind of lumping in with what you're saying. So it sounds like to me I should get somebody that has a clue, like, hey, look, it's way too loose for this or that. I remember one season in the Integra, the car was so loose. Well, the tires in the rear had tread, but they'd cycled out like they were rocks. I didn't realize that until I got in Jesse Calder's ST Civic, and he said it was loose. I'm like, this car isn't loose at all. So in a weird way, it took me driving someone else's car to realize, hey, my car is screwed up. Goofball, you need to buy some new tires. Well, that's a great point that, especially if you match it with somebody that notices things you don't, it's beneficial for both of you, probably.
Yeah, definitely beneficial. I mean, I usually notice setup things I can catch. It's just, I assume that it's the setup and not something that's broken on the car for the most part, Like, oh, that wheel bearing's bad and that's causing the car to be loose. I'll just be back there tuning shocks or something instead of worrying about my wheel bearing. But I've gotten a little better at it over the years, I guess. It's a little easier with the EF Civic / CRX things. We've had so many and we're very familiar with what happens to them now.
I remember last year, I think it was Hillary messaged me, hey, the car is doing this and that. Do you know? I'm like, Hillary, I don't know anything. I was thinking at least you guys are noticing what's going on. I sent my car off to Ron Williams' shop, I guess end of last year or the beginning of this year. He found 3 or 4 bolts that were loose, one had to be helicoiled. I never noticed until the people check it at tech. I know it's bad, I'm trying to get better, but I don't notice those things. I should probably hop in your car, have you hop in one of mine at some point. Be like, hey, what's wrong with this? Oh, cool, okay. And I swore last year I would adjust shocks, but I never put just shocks even on the car until this year, so I didn't do that. Oh, some other things you mentioned, what I wrote down here. Data. So how long ago did you start looking at data? And you said it's very helpful, especially if you bring somebody in that you're helping. How often do you help yourself with that data as well?
I just started running data the last couple of years. Everybody was running DL1 and all sorts of stuff, and Steve Winveen was in my region for the longest time, or was in my region for the longest time. I mean, he still is, but he's not racing anymore. He had some big DL1 computer thing, and there's all this stuff going on the screen, right? And he comes back in, and for the longest time, I just didn't have time for all that, and it all looked like Swahili to me, right? So he had, 12 things to look at on the screen. I couldn't comprehend all that. So we never really got into it. We gave it an early run, I think, with a max Q data when Craig and I were running.
Yeah. We
had a max Q data, but we found that we never had enough time between runs to look at it, so it kind of fell off and we didn't really do much. But last year, or the end of the previous year, when Solar Storm came out, and a lot of the time it takes to, the analysis happens right away. You come in from a run, you pick 2 runs, it's on the screen, and it's super quick. So now it's a lot easier to do it, and we do it now, and we're getting better at it, and I can notice things, a lot quicker. Before there just wasn't enough time with 2 drivers. You got 5-6 minutes or something between runs to get ready, especially at national events, and there just wasn't enough time for it. I'm getting better with it. I can see usually it helps the other person, but I do find things where it's me, and we're in the middle of adding some steering yaw and stuff like that I think might help
Oh, cool.
more, as opposed to just speed traces and G's and lines and stuff like that.
Yeah,
those are my strong suits. So I think it doesn't help me as much, but it definitely helps me show other people what's going on.
Yeah, to refine at your level, it sounds like you would need to see, what's my steering input from this run versus that run maybe? Like, why was I a tenth faster or slower in a section?
Yeah, and truthfully, before this, I get a lot more out of watching video of my runs. As long as I've always been a fan of the camera behind the driver, so I can see course and I can see hands and I can hear, what's going on. So that's a way that I always.
Are you mounting your camera on top like I am, where you can see in the sunroof, or you're putting it right behind you?
No, right behind me, inside the car.
Oh,
kind of like where a harness bar would be, or something along that lines. We created a fake harness bar type of thing to hold the camera so it's steady. And I like to be able to see, again, hand movements and how much steering input are you putting in. And, you sit back and compare both parts, both drivers at the same part of the course. And that was a common thing with the Toyos we would watch. And, Toyos were kind of numb. And you could have a steering angle of 30 degrees and it would turn just as much as a steering angle of 40 degrees. You would just scrub more Toyo off it, in the course of it. So, video was big, up until the Soul Storm kind of made it easier to look in between because you could always watch video. And
were you, what software were you using to compare two videos at the same time?
We would just watch.
Doing that.
Yeah, that would be after the event.
Yeah.
Come back in, and I used Race Render.
Yeah. Okay.
The most current thing, or we just open up two windows and have YouTube videos playing of both of them, or two programs just to kind of watch.
Yeah. To get the feedback. I'm so addicted to having the top sunroof version because I think I can see the whole course that when I got to drive the GT3 this year, I'm like, I wish this car had a sunroof. Like, please, just go ahead and cut a hole in the top of that and put that in so I can see. Because like you're saying, seeing the hand movement is great. Being able to see my helmet turn or not turn where I'm looking ahead, or especially if you're comparing to somebody else or I make these videos, it's like, oh, look, I'm looking all the way over there because I know it's a 180 and the exit's pretty important. So what else race-wise have you done? Like Spec Miata still sitting at the house? When did you get into any of that?
Haven't really done anything else. I've done some track days in the past. Actually, when I first bought my first Civic to build back in 05 or something like that, bought a stock car and then bought an ITA prepped 89 Civic along with it that I was going to use for parts to start. So we still have an ITA car. Haven't had it out to do any racing. It's on the short list of things to do. And, last couple of years. I
think you should get one more Civic before you do that, just in case you're thinking about getting another one.
Maybe I'll do that. But really I'm interested in it. The problem that it has been, and I'm sure most runs on this too, is just the amount of money to do it. To be at the pointy end is a jump in dollars. And I don't know if just going out and having a good time isn't going to cut it, most likely. So just a matter of either trying to line up sponsorship or saving our pennies to do that. And at the same time, it's less events if you want to go do competitive road racing or club racing or Trump or something like that. But our problem is that we don't want to cut out the solo at this point, so it's just adding more events onto this and another car to prepare. So,
hey, you don't have any kids running around there yet, do you?
No kids running around.
Well, do it now.
We have 9 cars. Does that count?
I don't count my cars. My wife will ask sometimes. I'm like, no, I'm not. I was like, I need to get rid of some of those projects that I will never touch again. I just know it. What might happen? So you aren't tracking so much. You've done a little bit of it. Did you find obviously, or is it obvious that the solo really helped on track, the little bit of time trials or what have you, what you've done?
I do believe it helped actually a lot. Everything's a lot slower. I mean, the speeds are faster, but the inputs are slower for you on road courses. So, car control because I was used to tossing the car around more than you do on a track. So as long as you can not freak out about the speeds, I thought it was really helpful. You know, noticing weight transfer and stuff like that all transferred over to track racing and track days.
Yeah, I've done very little, but the same thing, it just seemed like forever. It's like, oh, look, the car's sliding, but I've got 5 seconds to catch it. Okay.
Yeah.
So you design...
Typically doesn't mess you up for the next corner either.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, oh, I've got forever to get back over where I want to be. So we're going to get into the course design hopefully at some point, but knowing that you design courses, maybe before you design courses and now after you've designed courses, or let's think also ones you don't design, how much do you walk a course? What are your thoughts there?
I like to walk a course a lot, actually. I like to have a good plan of attack and a lot of strategy. Looking ahead is important, but I would rather know where I'm supposed to be before I look ahead and know where I'm supposed to be, I guess. So, nationals or something like that, a big event, I will probably walk it 10 times, maybe 15 times, depending on which day it is. Basically, I devote a lot of time for that, and, you know, I'm the guy that stands around and picks out, you know, I'm going to cross over this crack right here with the center of the car and stuff like that. Sometimes people look at me like I'm really strange when I walk courts and tell them those things, but I like to have a good plan of attack. As far as designing courses, I think I'm really technical when I design courses as well. You know, I'm an architect by trade, so I have an AutoCAD program, and a lot that I design here, you know, I have everything drawn up in CAD and everything's to scale, and I lay out cones and everything on the computer ahead of time to get, you know, certain radiuses that I want and the same, you know, different types of elements. So, you know, I'll measure arcs and make sure different arcs are there so we're not doing the same 90-degree corner at the same speed all the time and stuff like that. So I like to get technical and design stuff that way.
I'm ready to move out there, buddy. You've got places you can race all around you. I can grow lots of things playing farmer. But I don't think you have the sun very much in the winter. Like, we just got 2 feet of snow, last weekend, and the ground's already exposed or lots of 50%-ish now. I understand you guys get the snow some years and it just stays.
Yes, we have. Probably a good 4 months out of the year that it hasn't been that bad the last couple of years with snow, but it's just been cold. You know, lots of below zero. So when the snow does arrive, it hangs out for a while.
Yeah. Oh, back to your course walking. 10 to 15 times at nationals. Do you walk where you sit in the driver's seat?
I do.
Okay. I've already interviewed Bob Tennell, and that's already been played. But I blame him for that one time that he told me that time at least, I was just walking on the middle of the course. Well, I drove that line. It was kind of slow. So once again, people realize who you're following and maybe ask them, is that where you're going to be sitting in the driver's seat? Just so you know, and what car are they in? Because it really does come into play for people, especially it sounds like Jason. He truly is planning exactly where he wants to drive. Are you usually actually hitting those marks, or do you come back sometimes and go, oh, for some reason I set up over here instead of there at speed?
Typically I'm where I want to be and I hang with my plan. Sometimes things change though. You got to have some room for change if, you know, the speeds aren't where you think they're going to be. Pretty good at this point. You know, I've been in a similar type of car for a lot of years that, you know, I have a really good idea of, you know, how the car reacts and how many cones in a course I'm going to have to lift and not be able to make it and stuff like that. So I got a big logbook of, a mental logbook, I'll say, of, you know, courses and spacing and stuff like that I usually have a pretty good idea so I don't hang myself too often. If I was in a different car on a regular basis, I'm sure there'd be a lot more revisions to my course walks.
Okay, yeah. Be like, oops, yeah, this, whatever, Porsche GT3 or A mod or B mod is much faster getting here. And
sure.
Yeah, okay, that makes total sense. Oh, the nugget that I told you about earlier that you had told me years ago was when it came to course designing, you figured out that every lot should have generally a range of how many features or turns. Can you expand on that and explain your thoughts there?
Sure. maybe this is more of a local lot thing, but I don't think it is. We have, we run at Miller Park here in Milwaukee, and I know when I'm designing a course that I need to get somewhere in the range of 22 to 25 elements or turns. I don't want to call them elements, turns in a course in order to come up with a 55 to 60 second course. So when I'm designing courses, I make sure that I get, that many elements in it. Otherwise, if it has more elements than that on our lot size, then I know things are going to be too tight, and that's not fun. And if there's less than that, then there's maybe a little too much yeehaw or too much speed for, safety concerns and such. So I guess I know it's kind of specific to our course and our lot, not our course, but our lot. But if it's a lot in a similar size, I like to have so many turning elements, steering inputs.
I think that applies to everything. Since you've told me that a year, 2, 3 years ago, I've looked at that and tried to count when people design courses going, oh, this is a good way to gauge that. So for anybody designing courses, try to look at the courses you really like and the time frame you like and see how many elements. Do you count every slalom turn as an element? What all counts and doesn't count?
Yep, slalom cones, anything basically turning the wheel in the opposite direction. So if I have a dual apex decreasing radius corner, I would probably only count it as one. Even if it's a dual apex, just because you're not turning the wheel, an additional time. But if you're going from a left to a right, I would count that as one of my elements.
Yeah, I think that's great. So I'm hoping more people will adopt that, and it'll help us all have better courses, more consistent time-wise, and make sure they don't have too much, as you said, yeehaw time. Think about some tips for us for slaloms. What are your thoughts on slaloms? Jason is coming from a front-wheel drive car experience, it sounds like, for many, many years here.
Slaloms start at the beginning. Late apex, late apex, late apex. You really set the tone at the first cone in slaloms. If you're not behind the first cone, you're going to have to give it up somewhere down the line in order to make it through. Otherwise, you're just going to hit cones. I'm more of a steady state slalom driver. I know some people like to accelerate, brake type of thing. I'm more of the consistent, find the speed that I need. If it's a 7-cone slalom, I know if I get my speed right at the beginning, I can make it through the first 4 cones at the same speed, and then hope to accelerate out the backside of it, if available. But it all starts at the beginning. If you're not behind the first cone, you're not going to be accelerating out the backside of a slalom.
Good point. Yeah, that's been consistent in talking to everybody. What I found is when I say, "Oh, I've come flying into a slalom and hit the brakes," and most everybody's saying, "No." Tom Berry even said the data's proving it. He goes, "I drove a lot like that." Do you ever find yourself doing that in STC or ST, whatever?
Coming in
and do you ever try to slow down? Would you ever fly into it hot, or would you try to slow down before entering it?
I would try and slow down before. I mean, I tried. Every once in a while it doesn't work.
Huh? So I've done that. I've done that for years, and hearing this from all you guys, I'm like, wowzer. And then having Tom Berry goes, Kinch, you and we rode with each other, I guess, the beginning of last year a little bit, and actually Jeff's old Civic. And he goes, yeah, we try to stand the car on its nose, blah, blah. And I started thinking, I was like, wow, I think I'm doing that because of the Type R. I could get it to rotate and do weird things. So take notes. If I ever told you to do that, don't do that anymore. At least I'm going to try to see if I can try this year not to do that, because so many, Brian Peters, same thing. He goes, well, maybe an ST, but no, I'm thinking it's just a bad habit I have of, can I fly in? And what I realized is it's so hard to be consistent, like you're saying. It's harder to be late apex if you're adding a lot of brake in there, I guess.
I think the tried and true slow in, fast out thing applies pretty much to slaloms, just like all sorts of other corners. So, get it set up in the right place on the way in there, and when you're driving out the backside with more payoff.
Yeah. Probably the thing I'm doing right, maybe not braking as much as I think, is the light apex of the first cone. Being right on that cone, I tell people in every video I ever make, I'm like, hey, you've got to backside this one. If not, you're just tightening up the next one.
Well, however you're doing it now, don't get too much better at it.
I'm hoping I get a little bit. We'll see. Anybody can get lucky in a run here or there, I hope. Oh, and you mentioned watching video. So I went back to the year you won, I want to say, was it 2015? whatever year, the first day my car broke and the second day I finally was fast on the second day. Not that it mattered. But watching my video, I'm like, I wasn't even anywhere close to perfect, I didn't think, in my fastest run. Do you find that in some videos where you're fast, but let's say you are off the cone a foot or two? Does that occur to you, or do you hit all your marks when you're your fastest?
I pretty much hit all my marks when I'm fastest. I've had times at nationals where I was like, oh, you only get 3 to get it done, but I usually get it dialed in pretty good. The years that I'm off cones and it's bad, it's typically not a good year for me at nationals.
Yeah,
relatively.
And I realize, because distance is what once you're off the cones, you're adding distance. I just look back at that run, I'm like, oh, I was off some of the turns by like 2 feet. And at least one thing I keep telling myself and telling people is, whoever's on the best line at the maximum speed they can carry, and I guess the tightest line, is going to win. So I can easily drive the tightest line going slow. So I guess I'm wondering how much play, and it sounds like you're best obviously when you're on, because all of us are fastest, and it's just amazing. If you're always at the maximum grip or the most, it seems like you're obviously faster. So that's interesting that it makes sense that if you hit your marks, you hit your marks.
The key in there is maximum grip, I think. I think if you're keeping your car on the edge of grip, that's the key. From what I see in people in the data we looked at, if you're driving the right line, but you're not at max grip, it's not gonna compute to fast. So the key is keeping your car at the edge of grip everywhere, which is difficult, right?
And is that what you were talking about earlier? Is that what when you're referencing getting the steering yaw, are you pretty good at that maximum grip? Is that what you're noticing through the data?
Yes. I think, because usually I'm the one that's, when I look at the data and I'm faster in a corner, usually because I'm carrying more speed and with the same tighter line where people are not carrying as much speed. So based on those types of things, I assume that it's because I'm utilizing the tire better. Yeah,
you're on that line, that, let's say equal line, but you're pulling more G's, thus you're going faster through it. So once you're done with slaloms, let's say whatever, slalom into a sweeper or into a sweeper, do you have any thoughts there? Do you look at that when you walk the course? Do you pick an entry or an exit or both?
I think it's all part of the big overall, plan of attack. I'm always trying to accelerate out of a slalom as long as there's not something pinching me off. So again, like I brought up previously, if it's a 7 cone, I'm trying to get 4 cones in and I want to be accelerating, the 5th, 6th, and 7th cone out of a slalom. I think that's pretty known. But a slalom's just any other element in there, just 5 cones, but you got to figure out, are you going to give it up at the beginning of it, in the previous corner to get into a slalom, or are you going to come in fast? Depends what's before and what's after.
Yep.
I think that's always the determining factor.
And is there anything special on sweepers you're doing on the entry or exit thoughts? Let's say even when you're walking the course.
No, big sweepers and a front-wheel drive, low horsepower car. I'm trying to reduce distance a lot.
A lot.
Because, I don't know, I don't see the payoff. The amount of times that there's payoff for going faster or wider line is usually minimal. It's kind of like those times when you have to early apex something. It's out there, but in a general sense of things, you're not looking to early apex too many cones.
Yeah.
So I'm not looking to add distance in too many sweepers.
That's what I did when I followed Bob Tennell, this huge sweeper. I drove down the middle like a car width wider than usual and did not do so well. I brought that question up now, talking to Brian Peters. He looks at the exits of sweepers. He doesn't care about the entry. It's not on his mind. It's like your thought of coming out fast. He wants to make sure he can see and plan for the exit, which made a lot of sense to me when he said it. I just wasn't sure I'd ever said, I don't care at all about the entry. I'm just going to make sure I come out fast. Once again, he's in the rear-wheel drive, high horsepower generally, but that was a neat insight that he could put that into words.
I like that. Yeah, never heard it explained that way, but it makes sense. As long as you're at maximum grip when you're going around that corner and you're at the right place exiting, I think that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. Oh, Leslie Cohen said in these Civics, she goes, I just don't use the brakes. You've driven these type of cars a lot. Do you think you use a lot of brake?
I think I do use a lot of brake, actually. I'm a left foot braker. I'm constantly using the brake to, speed up, slow down, mid-corner. Hillary thinks that I do some type of voodoo magic mid-corner with the car because I get it to turn at certain times. Again, more of the maximizing the grip type of thing, but I'm frequently making little changes here and there in order to get the car where I want it.
Yeah.
But I definitely use the brakes.
Yeah,
as bad as they are in a Civic, and they may not slow you down as much as you think they do, I use them a lot.
Yeah, so I had the question for left or right foot. So he just said he's a left foot braker. I am as well. I probably drag the brakes. I'm touching them at probably weird times as well. Do you notice that you also ever take your foot off and just do a lift?
I do, but I have to really think about it. Truthfully, that's not. There are definitely times that I could use that when I look back, and I haven't used that technique when I should have. I believe, because I've been left foot braking for so long, and I'm trying to keep the car settled and not trying to upset the suspension and the weight transfer. That I generally don't do big lifts unless I kind of plan ahead for it.
Yeah. No, I'm in the same exact boat with you. I realized, I think it was sometime last year, I'm like, I hardly ever just lift. But yet I'd find myself doing that. There was one, I guess 2 years ago, New Mexico Pro. And I'm like coming down, lifting, the car's rotating just right. I'm like, oh, that was great. How did I do that? And it was taking your foot off the brake and just lifting. So I'm hoping this year I'll actually play with some of that and go, at times it's very convenient. I personally am amazed in the people that drive these same cars that do not left foot brake. I'm just amazed. They're obviously doing things like lifting and doing things differently because I can't imagine driving my style and not doing that.
I think a lot of that's car setup too. You get a car set up to left foot brake, and obviously it's a little looser than if you're right foot braking because there's a lot more abrupt jumping from pedal to pedal. People that don't left foot brake that hop in the car generally, in our car at least, generally find themselves struggling.
Find themselves backwards and wondering how.
Yeah.
Like, did you lift and make the input? Because you knew you were behind. Yeah. Okay, that did not work. So Hillary left foot brakes as well?
She does.
Okay, about to say. Otherwise, people have been co-driving with me generally do not left foot brake. I'm like, please start trying it. I think you'll like things better.
When Hillary first came into the Tiger car, she did not left foot brake. So I got her left foot braking when she started co-driving that. And that was a good improvement. More so just forcing to do it, and you start I don't know. For me, I couldn't imagine doing it without it. Just the way I place cars, and it's more mid-corner stuff, I think. Being able to adjust, approaching cones when I'm close to being on the gas, and I don't have to get out and do the pedal dance.
Hey, I'm once again amazed. People like David Falf never left foot broke at all, would drive the Type R Integra so fast. I'm like, I got him to co-drive mine once, probably a test and tune. Watching his foot go back and forth was amazing. I'm like, how can you make your right foot go back and forth so fast? Just like that, your ankle's probably a little sore after that.
Yeah. I've definitely seen there, people are fast in both ways. That's for sure. I think it's just a matter of kind of mastering your skill set, whichever one it is.
Yeah.
There's plenty of fast guys that don't left foot brake.
Oh, exactly. So you've done some teaching. Have you also, from the teaching and other things, what other kind of cars have you jumped in, and have you learned things from doing that, or is sticking to the one platform or one ST class really been beneficial? What do you feel on those?
I don't do a whole lot of instructing. Part of me thinks that I don't explain things well enough to people. Like, I kind of see them in my head, and it makes sense to me, but sometimes it doesn't make sense to other people. Unless they get Hillary and I go back and forth all the time. We're like, I told you to do that. And she's like, that's not what you told me. And I go, well, yeah, it is. That's exactly what I told you. But, after we talk about it a little bit, then, the lingo gets going back and forth. So as far as me hopping in other people's cars and giving them instruction, I don't think it's my strong suit. But I try. I have jumped into a couple other cars. I don't do a lot of car jumping. I think, again, mastering your domain and the thing that you're trying to win in, I think is a strong suit for me. Not having to, how's a car going to react with this? So generally throughout the year, especially towards the end of the year, I definitely wouldn't be car jumping, getting towards nationals and stuff like that. I do think that, driving a bunch of different cars, does help your skill set. I just don't think it helps to, really fine tune it. So,
Yeah.
Last year I was in the B-Mod car. Again, rear-wheel drive and aero and motorcycle motor and stuff like that, right? So I started off the year in that, and it took me 2 or 3, 4 events to kind of get back in the flow of, everything's backwards. It's not driving in deep as all get up and wait to get on the power. It's, brake early, get on the power way back there, from a guy in front-wheel drive car's perspective of things. So it took me a while to do that, and early in last year I was actually jumping back and forth between the two, so I was driving Pro Solos and the STS CRX, and then I was driving local events trying to get a B-Mod car ready for nationals at local. So that was trying, and I wouldn't recommend it if you're trying to be fast in either one of those classes. But somewhere around mid-season, I think I got better in the B-Mod, and things started clicking, a little bit better. But then I was back in the STS car for nationals. So, yeah,
that worked out okay. It worked out.
It worked out okay, but it wasn't optimally. If I haven't been in an EF chassis for a whole lot of years, I don't think it would have came back as quick as it did.
Yeah, no kidding. It's just kind of ingrained year after year. And that's one thing also, the fact that you guys were like, this car is not handling right. You knew that because of all your experience. Whereas had you hopped in some new class, some new car, you'd be like, oh, these just suck. You actually knew, hey, this is not doing what it should do. And what you say, you had to raise it up of all things to be responsive.
I tried, going into nationals last year, I think we threw everything possible at the car to try and make it. We were having some oscillation issues, corner left, or let's say left front to right rear was our issue. We've always had it a little bit in the Civic. So I think it's, we run stiff springs, right? So, but it was bad to the point where we get out of the car with some bruised ribs and such from the seats because it was bouncing around so bad. And throughout the course of the year, did a whole bunch of things. I kind of tossed my hands up about 2 weeks before nationals and was ready not to even go to nationals because I was so frustrated with the car. And I handed it off to Hillary and said, here, do whatever you want to do with it. I'm just going to drive. So she messed around and we softened some things up and raised the car and made a bunch of changes, and she got it back in line where it was drivable again, and I wasn't hating the fact that we were going to nationals. But that happened the event before nationals last year.
Wow.
But otherwise, I was pretty fed up with the car at that point.
And was it just feeling, or did you actually see the times weren't where you should have been?
It was consistency, not being able to repeat. Basically, the car was too low, and we were bottoming out the front end. And then it was, bouncing back to the opposite corner of the car, and it was kind of just you're along for a joyride of a car bouncing around.
That reminds me, for all you ST guys, Ron Williams, when he had my car and put the shocks on there and did it, he goes, your car's too low in the front. I go, oh yeah, nationals and the Pro Solo on the right side, it almost always bottoms out. He goes, yeah, your car's too low. I raised it up. I'm like, thank you. So, no, you look at all these cars, if you're copying me, your car's probably too low. And do you guys have a bumpy lot out there, or is it pretty smooth that you race on locally?
It's pretty smooth. We don't have a lot of bumps. There's definitely bigger bumps at Lincoln, but there's some jumps out there at times.
Yes.
Again, but our lots are pretty smooth.
Then you have some good feeling if you were noticing it doing that on a pretty smooth lot. Locally, I usually don't notice those things. At national, like, why is it bottoming out so bad in the front? So it took that to even realize that was going on.
Yeah, it was full undrivable. It kind of started the year before in 2014 nationals. I actually spun the car on my first run, and I should have been. Again, I wasn't thinking about car problems. It was fast, decreasing radius into a slalom, and there was a bump dead center in the middle of it, so I'm kind of on full tilt and trail braking into it, and then I hit the bump, and my first run I spin. And I just wrote it off as, I drove it in there too far, and, aren't going right. Okay, and I assume it's me because that's generally what I do. I don't think the car's broken or anything like that. So I go for my next run, and I proceed to get to the same point and backed off, and I have the huge tank slapper with full opposite lock going in there, and didn't spin, but obviously not the fast way around. And then after it repeated the third time on the third run, I kind of went, oh, something's going on. So, and then I started really paying attention to it. We started noticing the car kind of doing the pogoing, even on not big bumps, but it wasn't as noticeable as the huge hopping around pogoing effect. It was just, over little bumps, the car would kind of be unsettled and it wouldn't be running smooth across. So we worked on the shocks somewhat for day 2 and got it a little better. But we were kind of chasing it since the beginning of the season, truthfully, or from Nationals the year before. But I was running the B-Mod car, and Hillary's work schedule didn't have her in the car a whole lot, so we weren't really working on it too much until the B-Mod ride went away for Nationals, so then we hopped back in the CRX to get it all ready.
You're like, it's not working. It's all wrong. You got me wondering now. I finally drove my Civic, I guess last month sometime. And same type, we have an element, you get in there, I'm like, wow, the car after the slalom really kicks and it's kicking way far out. 2 times in a row, I'm like, I did nothing weird here, but the wrong bump setup type thing on this kind of really big hump we have. Just to kick the car, I said, okay, I've got to slow down a slalom cone before the exit. It just will not handle. So that's a good point. If your car is doing things like that, maybe it is your ride height, spring setup, pogoing. Is there a way to test that, maybe to find if it's bottoming out, putting, zip ties on the shocks?
Yeah, we tried that. And I guess the zip ties on the shocks helped a little bit. The way that our car's set up is it bottoms out before the shock bottoms out, which is a good thing. But I didn't have any reference on the shock shaft on where the car bottoms out on. Now I have some idea where it's at, and kind of mark down the ride height of, that's too low or that's too high.
Yeah.
Or whatever. No.
So basically, that if I'm thinking correctly, the upper control arms are bottoming out.
Correct.
Yeah, that's like where I had those. Skunk 2 made some. Those things are even taller and bottomed out even easier.
Yes.
So that's something for people to look at, something I will look at for sure. So some fun questions to wrap up if you have the time for it.
Yeah, no problem.
If you could drive anybody else's car, pick somebody's car you'd want to drive. Well. Do you want to go fast?
Kiesel's car is at the top. Way
there
up
you go.
That thing's a rocket ship. That's probably a common answer.
Yes.
After a year in the B-Mod car, I really love to do a B-Mod car. But A-Mod's really there too. I like the motorcycle motor and the shifting as opposed to the CVTs. But some B-Mod cars are awesome. Anybody that gets a chance to do that, definitely do that. That's open cockpit and aero is pretty awesome.
Have you been in a kart at all?
I have been in a kart. I have not been in a kart that actually fit me properly. The kart that I was in was made for somebody about 8 inches shorter than I was, and my knee was doing shifting for me. So, in the front, where the pedal location was on the front of the car, didn't even allow me to get off the gas all the way because I couldn't figure out why the cart was pushing so much. But I realized halfway through the day that I wasn't lifting off the gas all the way, so that was causing all the push. I don't recommend driving it like that. It's not fast.
Not fast and therefore not fun, I would say.
Yeah, it was still fun. I was sore, but it was fun.
That's several people have said, you got to get in one if you can. And Jay and Jamie Yost each bought carts. I'm a little scared to get in there. I'm like, but I keep hearing from people that have been in. I'm like, it's something you should try. Like, how bumpy is it and how bruised do you get, being that there's no suspension at all? You have any other thoughts or tips for people, from co-drivers to cars to just do it to?
Well, if you're new, just do it. For sure, it's a good time. If you haven't done, if you're a solo guy and you haven't done a pro solo yet, pro solos might ruin regular solo for you. Pro solo is pretty awesome. If we could just do pro solos all year, I would do that, because back-to-back runs and the adrenaline rush of pro solo is a great time.
Do you still get shaky hands?
I get shaky hand every once in a while, yeah. If I get shaky hand, it's a good one. Typically, my shaky hand happens at a local event, though. Taking an index at a local event, sometimes I get some goods. We have a lot of top drivers in Milwaukee region, and winning a local PAX event is typically harder than winning nationals. So I've had several times at a regional event where I come back with a shaking hand, but you got to nail it. If you don't have a 100% run at a local event, you're not winning a PAX around here. So those are the good ones.
Thanks for listening. For the show notes and contact information, please visit autocrosstalk.com. There you can also subscribe so that we can keep you up to date on new shows as they come out. Also, please leave us a review on iTunes and subscribe on iTunes for the upcoming shows. You can connect to our Facebook page at facebook.com/autocrosstalk. You can share your thoughts, your insights, your questions, your suggestions there. Also share with your friends. Hopefully you found it entertaining and motivating, and hopefully other people will as well. It's been fun, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for listening, and check back next week for the next show.